IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simplified, the podcast that is guaranteed to make you look smarter without actually interfering with your native state of being. And in connection with that, we have a very delightful topic today to go with a very delightful set of hosts, namely,
let us actually celebrate the fact that the four of us have made it to a recording, all of us together, without needing to resort to the AI-powered Srikeit that we had to use for the last 3 episodes.
Lands far away, it's been very difficult for the four of us.
It's actually not the distance; it's the time zone.
Correct. Ever since Srikeit has moved to Canada, it has become new unfound land for us.
Jeez. Oh man, I missed that.
If you want, I can pull up the Pandan from the Canada.
I think once is enough. Once is always enough.
Once is enough. Once is more than enough. Sorry, Naren.
Yes, so
you were saying
set of delightful hosts, starting with most delightful host, namely me, because I am the oldest.
I mean, 90% of our listeners are here for you only, Naren.
Okay, I'm feeling so nice. My chest is swelling with pride, and I am conscious of an elevated sense of importance.
What a beautiful segue.
So, please welcome co-hosts Chuck,
Sup,
Srikeit, and Tony. And my question to all of you guys is: what is your first conscious memory? What do you first remember as something which you felt or you remember?
So for me, it was I guess I must have been 3 or 4, I think, and we had one of those. I was staying in Bahrain at the time, and we had one of those washing machines that used to dispense very hot water. I'm not sure if they do that anymore.
You mean a kettle?
But it did. And we used to keep it in the bathroom. No. Not for consumption. This is most definitely waste. And for some reason, we kept it in the bathroom. And because hot water would be dispensed, it was kind of like the rule that you don't go into the bathroom when the washing machine's on, because it can scald your feet. Of course, I was too young to take cognizance of these instructions, and I somehow managed to open the door. I went in and I absolutely burnt my feet. And I distinctly remember going in, yelling, and my next memory was lying on a doctor's table with like my feet, the underside of my feet were like full of bubbles, I want to say. And I am pretty sure, and I couldn't walk for about a week after that. This was the earliest thing that I ever remember.
Memory.
Delightful, I know.
Yeah.
But it's a painful memory.
I think the whole painful memory thing is a theme here, because for me as well, I think I might have been same 3 or 4 around the time. I unfortunately never had the pleasure of having my grandparents around, because they passed away almost all well before I reached any level of consciousness. And the earliest memory I have is of my paternal grandfather passing away. Like, not him specifically. I don't remember much about him, but I remember this very vivid scene of my mother sitting on a bed and crying. And like a whole bunch of building people are coming to console her and all that stuff. And it's also one of the few memories I have of someone picking me up. Like, my dad was holding me. And like, I have this memory of being in his arms and being held up, which is also a rare memory to have. So yeah, that was my earliest probably memory, because I was probably the youngest then. I have a lot of other happy memories from childhood, but yeah, this is the earliest one, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Let's salvage this and just get into one of those happy memories, please, because I feel we might be on a trend over here.
The happier memory was of me actually telling a story to some people in school. So I had gone to school and I was telling people about a completely fictional made-up story of a ghost in a well. And everybody's hooked to every word, because I've given a lot of detail. And everyone's like, that much detail cannot be possible for a ghost in a well. And I've said that, oh yeah, that ghost is there. She has nice hair. She does this and she does that. And I've like freaked out a whole bunch of kindergartners over there. So that was a pretty happy memory for me, at least.
So it
Right
was
now,
established
somewhere
long
someone
back.
is recounting the same thing in another podcast, saying that the worst memory I've had is there was this kid in my school.
Wow, super. Well said.
I have something similar actually. I remember I was absolutely petrified when I was going to school for the first day. I always knew that this thing existed.
But ghosts.
When my parents dropped me off, I was like,
Ghosts. What exists?
What? No. School. A business
Same.
school without the business. That
Ghosts
one.
in a well only.
That thing. That's same. Yeah. I distinctly remember suddenly my fear changing into, array, I have audience now, and getting up on top of the table. And if reports are to be believed, and a tight spanking from my parents later, that I threatened to strip in front of the class.
Anything for an audience, Chuck. Anything.
Anything for an audience. Hey, you did that too. I think you and I have both, we built our advertising bona fides from then itself. Then you should realize, give these two a PowerPoint and they will be happy. Take this PowerPoint and go sit in the corner.
Don't work, take your clothes off.
Wow. On such outgoing, confident
Okay,
kids.
enough of all this. One do these questions end up being like confessionals? So,
Yeah, I think
Tony, please.
basically timeline is fully muddled, right? But I think one of the first memories that I have is my. I remember I had 5 imaginary friends. Still remember one friend was called Pommy. I don't remember the other 4 names, but I distinctly remember my elder brother telling me that your imaginary friends are imaginary, and I'm like, huh? No way. And then I had to ask my mom, and I think then I realized that. But I mean, you never have any of you had imaginary friends? They were actually real, dude. I believed in them. Yeah. So anyway, my brother.
Yeah. I still have.
You still have an imaginary.
Yeah. I still have a bunch of guys who I like discuss stuff with in my head. Yeah, absolutely. I also realize that if anyone has
podcast,
like, I realize that
those are not voice in your head. We are real.
Wait. Oh wow, this is going to be a very good segue into the conversation. Actually, the 7.5. By the way, do you realize that it's 7.5 minutes that we've been recording till now? Everything that we said is absolutely perfect fodder for like therapy. Like imaginary friends, somebody stripping in class, like the first memory was somebody dying. Like it's just like stuff that
whenever Simplified ends, basically we've all gone to therapy. That would be like last card saying,
oh dude, but no, but
taking this offline.
Taking this offline. No, but like in the topic of imaginary friends, like I didn't exactly have imaginary friends, but I had like these set of hand-me-down wrestlers that my cousin had given from Dubai, like these wrestling figurines and stuff like that. And I used to so I didn't exactly have completely imaginary friends, but I used to believe that these guys like were real. Like I used to believe that these guys were actually like, I built storylines for them while they fought and all that stuff. Like, so yeah, I mean,
of course, this is absolutely amazing. However, whenever we do this, somehow or the other random stories are linked to the actual topic that we're going to do. I have another confession to make on that
wrestling was real at some point.
Oh yeah, for sure. Dude, my childhood was too wasted if I realized too early if it was not.
Yeah. So we used to be. So I think around the time when I was in school, and probably three of us, make the 3 of us, was when the whole Jurassic Park craze was like at its absolute peak, right? So we had a bunch of guys who were like absolutely crazy about dinosaurs. And we used to, and I remember one of our friends had little dinosaur figurines, and he'd given me one of those, and it ended up becoming one of my little like prized possessions. And he said that this will give you good luck, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So, but in like out of friendship and all that, I used to keep it with me, and I used to say that, okay, this dinosaur brings me good luck. Years later, I told the story to Divya, and she found it absolutely hilarious.
Oh, cool.
So cute.
Listeners can't see this, so can you describe what you're seeing?
A gigantic, pretty colorful stegosaurus.
And very colorful
Diplodocus.
Yeah.
So with the face of a camel.
Brontosaurus.
It looks like camel. I know that exactly. That
direct lineal ancestor of Govinda, actually, the color scheme. Dino ancestor.
And it's got like, it's got a tiger, a coconut tree, a fish. So basically, it's a Kerala dinosaur. It's a Keralasaurus.
Naren,
what is a Keralasaurus?
Yeah,
okay.
so
moving on, Naren, your first memory. I mean, after the Big Bang, like
first memory was at Big Bang.
On the first day, there was light and it was good.
So, yeah, I remember where I was growing up, there was a Krishna temple next to our house, and someone used to take me there every day. And I remember a man, just his feet tapping to the beat of whatever bhajan was being sung. And I just remember that foot. I was just thinking about it, and I just remember that foot going up and down, beating time. So that's that's like it's filled my mind now, and that's a great segue into the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is consciousness. So we all have this feeling of being us. That's where our memories start from. So that is when, like, for example, Chuck, you said your feet got burnt. Your feet got burnt. So you remember that happening to you. Or Srikeit remembers somebody dying and you noticing that somebody has passed away, and everything that. Or Tony realizing that he has friends, but no one else knows about it. So it's inside his head. And this is something which I've been of late really thinking a lot about. And of course, many people have thought about it and have not been able to come to any sort of conclusion or understanding. So there's several layers of this. And I'd like to just sort of go over these things with all of you. So what does consciousness mean to you? What is the state of being Chuck or Srikeit or Tony? What does that mean? What have you ever thought about it? Have you ever ruminated on whether there is an inner you apart from your body and apart from your physical self?
That is
question. Loaded question. Yes, this.
I used to think about this a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's a simple.
Then I stopped thinking and started listening to podcasts to fall asleep. This is carried out for like 6-7 years. So I think over a period of time, I've consciously tried not to think about it. Would probably be and just get caught up in the day-to-day things, right? But it's a deep question. I haven't considered it for quite a while, actually. Now, I used to think about it a lot. Not now.
I don't know. I suppose, yeah. I mean,
I thought about it more in the context of there was this one. There's this YouTube channel it's a tiny YouTube channel called the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, right? And in that there is they basically take these German has all these complex words, right? It's not just German. A lot of different languages have complex words like that. And there's one Japanese word called mori, right? And I may be getting this wrong. I don't know. I'll have to double check it and whatever. But I think it's mori more often than not. Mori is MORII, which is about the feeling to want to capture a moment while it's passing by, right? And it talks about how we kind of like the entire generation's obsession with taking pictures and taking all of these moments and like capturing them in that particular sense. And that's more because the moment is so spectacular that you don't want to let it go. And so therefore you whip out your phone and like start capturing that moment. But it also then talks about it from the perspective of while you're capturing that moment, you're not really experiencing it, right? You're just so busy capturing it that you've never got the first-hand experience of that. You've only got the memory that you captured on your phone, and you can like live it through that in some ways. And that's when I was going through that was when I experienced like a whole bunch of I was thinking about my consciousness and myself in like experiencing these moments. Like now we are there is such a inherent anxiety of like having to share a moment while it's happening that we tend to ignore experiencing a moment at that very point of time. And in that context, I've been like when I'm experiencing something amazing, right? I very consciously now, and it's a more recent development. I've very consciously now tried to stay as present as possible, where I'm like, okay, I am in this moment now. Let me just immerse myself in this moment. Forget about every other aspect of this moment, including my anxieties, my thoughts, my intrusive, whatever is going on. And like experience this moment, because then I will enjoy this moment a lot more in my memories than I will with any phone of any sort, right? And when that memory is ready to go, it's fine, right? Like it's okay to let that memory go at that time, but I have enjoyed it when it existed. So from that context, you also start thinking about yourself and thinking about it from the perspective of what is it that you truly enjoy doing, right? And what is it that you truly like doing? Like a lot of people, and I think if you look at I know it's a slight deviation from our topic, but if you look at like the so-called Instagram generation of today, it's actually the joy is not in the moment, but the joy is in someone else's validation of your moment. And that's where you have kind of like shifted that entire locus of what you enjoy from the moment to others telling you, oh, what a moment you enjoyed, right? So that's what, I mean, for me, like consciousness is about being true to understanding what is it that you truly enjoy. It's fine to enjoy the other part, and then you become like a photographer or you become a person who's actually capturing these moments. But a whole bunch of people are now sacrificing enjoying a moment for capturing it in some ways. So that's one thing. When you just told me that just came to mind. Yeah,
that's beautiful. It actually reminds me, I mean, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot as well. Like, and I think I discussed it with either Tony or Naren at one point of time. It's about just deeply listening, deeply reading, deeply watching something without distraction. The way I listen to music right now, actually, so I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've moved my entire expensive headphone setup away from the computer. I actually listen to it over there, away from the internet. So, that's kind of like my little Kopcha right now. And it also reminds me of the conversation that we had with Utsav all those years ago on slow travel. Yeah. So kind of for that as well, be in the moment. Slow travel, be in the moment and all that. It's just an extension, right? Slow living is actually a philosophy these days. But going back to Naren's question, I think consciousness, if I were to simply put it, I think it's an experience that you have of living life that nobody else can. Like Srikeit was saying, he goes through something. I can go to the exact same thing in the exact same setting. We can put everything else the same, right? We might be going to the same office, doing the exact same thing for the exact same client, wearing the same thing, having pre-gaming in the same way, and listening to a band which we have heard only together the same number of times, and we will still have a very different experience, both of us, even if we are somehow magically in the same spot as well. So I think that is really that gets the crux of what consciousness really is. I think it's a unique experience that you have, and it is impossible for somebody else to kind of experience. And this leads to all those kind of questions that I'm sure everybody has thought of at some point of time, right? How do I know that all of you are really existing, just like how you think that, I'm real? Maybe you're the only person who actually exists and everybody else is just a simulation, as it were. We will obviously get into David Chalmers and his philosophies at some point of time during this conversation, but I think that's quite simply what it is. And that leads to other fascinating questions. What else has consciousness? Is it only humans? Do animals have consciousness? These two things that an animal like a cat or a dog does, but then do amoeba have has consciousness? If you go down to that level, does this table, does this mic have, does this podcast, which doesn't have a physical...
Say singularity. Say singularity.
Oh, that's what. Wow. You're going too fast. Singularity is 28th episode.
Give me an S, give me a 9. Wondering where are they going with this? Yeah.
There's this old Harry Belafonte song.
We have answered your question.
I remember one phrase in that. It was clear as mud, but it covered the ground. The confusion made the head go around. So this is pretty much in that territory, right? It's clear as mud, but it covers the ground. So the guy who first is credited with thinking or putting it into words, I'm sure a lot of people have thought about it, was René Descartes. Right? So Descartes said that famously cogito ergo sum, and I found out about cogito ergo sum by reading Asterix comics of all things. So in Asterix the Legendary, that is the password.
Yes.
And I was like, what the hell is cogito ergo sum? And this was pre-internet age. So then I come across René Descartes and I said, wow. And so Descartes' point was this, that everything is in your head. And you can't tell whether it's a dream or it's reality, because we have very realistic dreams. So how do you objectively know? So you can't. Descartes' answer is you can't. And all you can know is that you think. And therefore he says, I think, therefore I am. And that's it. Nothing else. And then he stretches it a little bit.
At this point, I'm going to rehash the joke I once said, because it's very apt at this point, which is one of the most complex jokes I've heard, is that a philosophy professor is telling his students this he says, okay, I'm going to tell you a story. A horse walks into a bar and the bartender asks, so will you have a whiskey? And the horse says, I think not. And poof, he disappears. Right. And all the philosophy students start tittering at that particular point of time. And obviously the teacher starts saying that. And he's like, the reason I told you this joke without revealing the punchline was because it would be otherwise putting Descartes before the horse.
Yeah. One of those ones, yeah.
Yeah, the Descartes before the horse. So sorry, but it was necessary to rehash this at this point of time. Please continue.
And so everyone who got that joke needs to be seriously worried because you're not supposed to get the joke. Yeah. So Descartes was like that, right? So Descartes, and then he stretched it out to say that if everything exists, even when you are not there, that means there is a God who exists and we all exist in his mind or something like that. So he covered a little bit of theology. But later generations were able to kick the theology out, but they were not able to kick this concept out. For a lot of people, there was a clear distinction between mind and matter.
Correct.
So, and then after a period of time, as the knowledge, much later actually, say several hundred years later after Descartes, when people realized how the brain functions and how thinking happens, they found many curious and interesting things. One of the most curious and interesting is there is this thing called a corpus callosum, which connects two hemispheres of the brain. So in people who have very severe epilepsy or something, one of the procedures people used to try, they don't try it any longer, was to cut the corpus callosum. So it did not seem to affect the functioning of the individual, but you actually, it's a big connection of nerve fibers and you just cut it right through the middle. So the two hemispheres which would communicate through the corpus callosum, now left and right hemisphere are pretty much independent. They are communicating through other non-corpus callosum connections, but the corpus callosum is cut. And for these people, they found that they had two conscious selves. So the left brain had its own consciousness and the right brain had its own consciousness. Then a lot of clever experiments to demonstrate that. People who had the corpus callosum cut, they would give them some question, which was a left brain specific question, like an arithmetical thing. And then you would ask the other side the question and the other side would not know that the other question was asked or something like that. So it was very intriguing. And the other thing that made things even more intriguing was the discovery or invention of LSD. So LSD apparently dissolves the sense. Yeah, it does. Okay, so it dissolves the sense of self. So people, they reported an altered state of consciousness, which challenged the entire conception of consciousness as a whole.
Wow. Okay. But before you go there, Naren, when you said that left brain, right brain thing and about voices in our head, there's always this classical trope of cartoons or otherwise your angel popping out from one side, devil popping out from one side, giving you different. Does it have to do with left and right brain, or is it just
that? No, that's really actually that's just that's just your conscious because we all have that. You know that you mustn't do something, but you are tempted to do it, and then you have a little bit of an internal debate. Oftentimes, we are just trying to maximize the game theoretical. So we just
and just to continue on the.
1 second, Srini, I just like it when Naren said LSD altered state. Tony went off into, what really? And both you and I were like, obviously. So I think that should be just read into this what you
diethylamide. Diethylamide, okay. So just continuing on Naren's angle of, very left off with Descartes and that angle of God coming in. And I think, as you said, future philosophers drop that angle of God. And I've mercifully studied a little bit of this context in the university and the future version of this, which was a really interesting concept which came up in postmodernism, which is called deconstruction. It all comes down to this concept. Derrida. So Jacques Derrida is the father of deconstruction, and he actually came up with this entire thing saying that there is no, so like he was very anti, what is that school of thought, Atlas Shrugged.
Existentialism.
Existentialism, yes.
Objectivism,
objectivism and existentialism, saying everything has a greater meaning. He firstly trashed that. He said nothing has meaning. The only way meaning exists is with, like you said, Chuck, perspective and difference, right?
Meaning is in the brain
that's what, in the difference and in the perspective of the two people. So for example, when I say the word house, you have an image of house that pops up in your head. I have an image of house that pops up in my head. And say if you were to construct those houses, that's why those two houses would be different, because we have different images of them. So the difference only exists in our brains. The difference can only exist in the world because there is difference in brains and difference in people.
Unless you went to school in the 90s and are asked to draw a landscape and every kid draws the exact
exactly
same
it.
way.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And that is one way, like where, I mean, which is what postmodernism also talks about, is how all the older structures are trying to kind of put everything towards that greater. Humans have always had a drive to unify everything, right? Like to say that, okay, there is one leader, there is one school of thought that is superior to everyone, there is one God, there is one everything, right? What deconstruction at its very essence said is that the world is filled with difference, and those differences are what make us tick. If everyone thought the same way, then we wouldn't exist. I think, therefore I am is the core of that, is that we need to all think differently. If we all think the same, then we are all just one. We are not individuals anymore, right? And therefore, that whole difference aspect of postmodernism comes into play, and saying that how difference is essential for us to actually have that plurality of thought, right? It is the plurality of difference that allows for humankind to exist and progress the way it does. If we all start thinking the same way, then it's only going to be chaos. And like we basically are like reducing ourselves and eliminating ourselves from the equation if we are not able to say something new.
Yeah.
Let's just wake up from that little dream, snap back to reality. By which I mean a break, and then we will get back to the simplified discussion on consciousness. Hello, it's time for the simplified discussion on consciousness yet again. Let's go.
So I'm assuming then that one conclusion from that school of thought is that this is what makes humans different from all other species that exist, unless we don't understand what this means in their context and their world.
Does a dog know it's a dog?
So dog doesn't know it.
Yeah.
No, not. I don't think it's about that.
Actually,
I think it's about the differences between dogs and.
There is a huge school of thought which says that animals also have consciousness.
Yeah.
Right. So at one level there is. So what do you mean by consciousness? So that's what David Chalmers said. Easy problem of consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problem of consciousness is things like feeling pain, or maybe feeling pleasure even, or whatever it is. So there are neurochemical circuits, right? So there is a reward and punishment mechanism. So, you touch something hot and immediately you get an alert in your brain, some neurochemicals, those kind of things, right? And similarly with pleasure, you got a really good meal or something really delicious to eat and something else is triggered. So those can be explained away. And it is quite easy to imagine all living organisms feeling that, including amoeba, bacteria, everything, right? So that's how the world operates. That's how life operates, plants, everything. But there is another hard problem of consciousness, which, as Tony said, does a dog know it's a dog? Like a human knows it's a human. Or we, the level of, understanding that we have about ourselves. Do animals have that? Do other creatures have that? So that's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, and by extension, it's fascinating to think that there could be a higher creature, and I use higher in quotes here, that says, look at these poor humans, they don't know that they are dash, just like we think this dog doesn't know it's a dog. So there could be another larger
intelligence,
I don't know, whatever, plane or intelligence or whatever. So it's fascinating to think that way. But I think David Chalmers, that hard question as he defines it, is fascinating, right? This is astonishing long Guardian long read, which I'll link out in the notes of this episode, which anyone who's interested in this should definitely read. He also last year wrote a, I think, 600-page book on consciousness called Reality Plus, which is a bit of a slog to get through, to be honest. But I think one of the points that he was making over there, and this was also at a time when there was all this hoopla around the metaverse and virtual reality and all that sort of thing, which the 2021 version of hype and back in the day, where his point was, see, virtual reality, quite simply put, if you put on an Oculus or whatever you see, that is also real because you are experiencing it. So the point he was trying to make is that anything that you experience is real, whether it is what we classically call real, as in this physical table in front of me, or whether it is bits and bytes that you're seeing on your Reality Plus, your Vision Pro, or whatever it is. Ultimately, your brain is interpreting these signals, etc. Therefore, there is real feeling. Therefore, it is real. This is his basic premise that he goes and slogs on for about 600 pages. But I think there's a hint of truth to that, right? It throws into question what
is it
reality
real because
anyway, which is the logical endpoint of any stoner session.
Because you experience it, or is it real because your brain has created?
I think that's the point. I think that's a point that he was making. It's real. Yeah, that's a point he was making. Yeah, so exactly. Yes, and I think he uses dreams as an example as well. So even if we live in a simulation, like many scientists think that we actually do, very Matrix-like, it doesn't matter. It is still real because we at some level are experiencing this as reality. Neo, before he knew that he was in the Matrix, felt all those emotions, which as any other human would. So those are very, very real. I guess the other point that he was kind of trying to make is we see this dichotomy between real and virtual because now we have access to that kind of technology. Maybe 20, 30 years back when, something like an Oculus or reality or whatever, it couldn't be fathomed by somebody in say 1910 or 1850. It would have been so out there that there was no benchmark to compare real versus something else. But now that we are enlightened, now that Facebook has become Meta and has enlightened all of us to the possible existence of the metaverse, now we can say, okay, is this real? So it's more a debate about what is real anymore, and it takes consciousness along with it.
Reality is a different debate. Consciousness is a slightly different debate. Okay, so yeah, they're kind of linked to each other. Ultimately, reality is what you perceive inside your mind. But so a lot of reality deals with how we connect sense data. So we get all our inputs from our senses, and how we connect that to the external world. So that's what. And we have experiments, and we know that our senses are fallible, and we have experiments to sort of balance out that fallibility and make more accurate measurements. So that's a separate space, and that's important for different kind of philosophy. There is another bunch of philosophers who say that consciousness is really just a construct. So there is no real reason. We've just built this feeling of consciousness as a part of the neurochemical process in our brain, and that it has no real higher significance. And the consequence of this is that artificial intelligence systems can also be conscious at some point of time if they are not already. Yeah. So that...
Tony, would you want to explain why you are celebrating?
Yeah.
But anyways,
I think
it
came to AI, so he's like a little... Yeah. So people are spooked by, a lot of serious people are spooked by the idea that AI might be conscious. And they define AI consciousness as the ability of AI systems to decide for themselves and act accordingly. To feel, decide, and act accordingly. So that's what scares people. So if you have a sufficiently advanced AI system which has decided what its terminal goals are, it will take any instrumental goal in order to achieve its terminal goal. And
but
the example
are you then saying that is the AI system deciding its own terminal goal, or it needs a creator for that?
So now somebody created some terminal goals for the AI system, and the AI system is autonomous and complex. Yeah, no. It's now, let us say the AI system has the ability to alter it and change it and sort of evolve those terminal goals into the terminal goals that would have been set by the designer would not have been very precise. Perhaps they're not very precise. And an evolved system makes it, sort of clarifies everything. And let us say you told it to sort of, I don't know, make houses or sort of
It's
search for new
basically
planets
like,
or whatever, and
having
it figures out that my terminal goal is to get rid of all human beings. So if it figured that out on its own, it also knows that one of the terminal goals it could have is self-preservation. And it is smart enough to realize that if it tells the humans that its goal is to exterminate humans, the humans will try to exterminate it. So it won't tell and will take whatever steps required to achieve that terminal goal, including hiding stuff from humans, that kind of thing.
Right.
We are talking about
basically it's like we've had AIs, for instance, that play chess or play Go or whatever. But what if there's an AI that's put in a world like, let's say, GTA, right? And basically said, like, there is no real thing that you have to do there, right? It's a world and now you figure out shit for yourself. And it could like turn into the most evil thing, conniving, planning thing that you have no control over, basically.
Yeah. So if you take GTA, take the GTA engine and arm it with real world tools. GTA has some strange objectives, right? So you really don't know. Nobody really knows what many programmers have slapped together many objectives onto the GTA thing. So nobody really knows. And it could, just decide for itself that, hey, these humans are just getting in the way, let's kill everyone. That kind of thing. So the point was, is that consciousness? Is that so? And that's actually, it's a very dark and very interesting, fascinating thing, but very dark. And if you listen to a very persuasive member of that school of thought, you will come away you'll sort of give away your trousers and because the world is going to end in a week or two, no point, and generally go walk into the sunset. So
give away your trousers and walk into the sunset.
We here on Simplified have a habit of linking everything back to evolution at some point of time. So I'd like to think that is a combination of consciousness and humans' unique ability to feel and perceive emotions. This unique kind of combination that have some kind of role in our evolution, in the way we have evolved and, all that, the whole telling stories thing, which Harari is a fan of doing. You think there's something there, Naren? Like this combination of emotion and consciousness?
Before the scientific era, right? So before science became a method and people... So the scientific method is pretty radical. So you have experiments, you try to determine them, and you have hypotheses, you prove them. This is the world we live in. But just a few hundred years before that, it was completely... People used to be burnt for witchcraft. People, they used to, you just say that somebody is possessed and, sort of kill them, or randomly people would do bad things to each other. And people would live in abject poverty because there was no technology at all. So if there is any drought or any failure in any kind of a system, hundreds and thousands of people just bubonic plague, people are dropping like flies. What happened to consciousness then? Were people still conscious? Were they feeling things? What was life, just as rich and meaningful for them as it was for us? You have this entire thing, you have no idea how anything, every morning the sun rises because of the grace of some god, and every day it sets because of, the machinations of some devil. And you are at the mercy of all these forces. Is that consciousness different from what you and I experience? It's a difficult question, Amna.
Yeah. I read something. Maybe Chalmers himself said this. Whether collectives have a consciousness, like whether a swarm of bees together, maybe individually they don't have this combination of consciousness and emotions as we do, but together as a collective, do they? And this has been taken to the extreme by some philosophers who have also suggested that the entire universe has a consciousness, which might seem far-fetched to some, which might seem kind of natural to those who believe in a higher power, whether it's God or otherwise. But that's also kind of fascinating to me, right? Like, we are used to consciousness at an individual human level, and maybe that's only because we don't know what else is happening. Maybe the closest I can think of is trees in a forest. They often say, right, the roots of the trees are the original internet. And it kinds of make me think that maybe an individual tree is not conscious by itself, but an entire forest or a grove of trees is kind of conscious as a collective. It's kind of, then it extends consciousness from being just one entity to, say,
Amazing.
A collective. Maybe Simplified, for instance, is conscious.
When a tree actually falls in a forest and no one's around, the collective ecosystem actually puts the tree back, actually. And it's never fallen.
I don't know if you're being metaphorical over this.
I'm going to involve.
If a tree falls in a forest and no one's there, like, did it actually fall?
If a tree falls in the metaverse, the blockchain will record it.
Guess we know which one of us has purchased meta stock.
Zen koans for the modern age. Yeah. Maybe we should do one Zen koans for the modern age as a book. Yeah.
I think before we...
but that's fascinating. Like the forest or any of those things is like a self-sustaining
it's something out of an animated movie, right? We've seen so many of these as kids, like Toy Story or something like that. It's when all these objects are there together and the human is out of the room that these things quote unquote come to life. So what is consciousness? Is it coming to life, or are we, like, I've often thought, like, we are actually just a bunch of atoms that just happen to come together in some sense. We are also a collective in some sense, right? Again, all great questions to think about with over beer or your intoxicant of choice, I'd like to believe. I don't think there are going to be any answers out of this. I think consciousness is something that
it'll be so awesome if an army of philosophers couldn't figure it out and 4 Simplified hosts crack the problem of consciousness. Like, this will be the episode. And it's a solved problem now. Refer to the Simplified episode number.
No. The real irony would be like, we finished, we solved the problem of this thing, and all of us forgot to record locals.
Maybe local files are consciousness.
Yeah, just on philosophy and therapy, which we started, right? There's actually a friend of ours. I don't want to name them unless, I haven't taken their consent. But basically, he went to a therapist, and basically the therapist said, "Stop reading philosophy books, then you'll be okay." He just stopped doing it, and he was back to being okay, actually. So sometimes it's
I agree. Actually, I stopped reading the news and I became happy again.
So one of the first interaction or sort of conversations I had with Sheila, we were just engaged. She came out to my house and I very proudly showed her my bookshelf, and there were a lot of really heavy books. So I had so there was 3 or 4 books on philosophy. There was one book called A History of Western Philosophy, big thing by Bertrand Russell. And so Sheila, looked very suspiciously at them. And she asked me, why do you have such big books? So I, in an attempt at levity, I said that, I read all these big books because I hope to sound smart, and, girls will get attracted to me, or some such poor attempt at levity. And then Sheila told me that, instead of reading those books, if you had bench pressed them, you would have got more girls to follow. So, that was...
And that's apt way to...
Isn't that the truth of life?
Yeah. Now that we have got one Naren story out of the way, do you have any quotes from Wodehouse or Yes Minister on consciousness? It's like GPT, no? It's like Naren is like Wodehouse GPT.
But that is the terminal goal of Simplified, right? To bring back Wodehouse quotes and Yes.
There is one very funny author. At least he used to be funny in his earlier books, and he sort of went off the rails a little later. Named Richard Gordon. So Richard Gordon wrote a series of books called the Doctor series. So they were they were the titles were Doctor in the House, Doctor at Sea, Doctor whatever, Doctor this and Doctor that. So in the standard thing is there is a protagonist. His name is Miles Grimstick, and Miles Grimstick is like sort of learning to become a doctor and he's a very incompetent guy. So and he stumbles through life and his experiences and things. That is very funny, and it has a very Wodehousian sort of sense of humor. So one of these things, Miles Grimstick has gone for a viva. It's an anesthesia viva. And the doctor asks him, what are the 3 stages of anesthesia? And Miles Grimstick says, awake, asleep, and dead. So that's a bit of conscious. Yeah, that's what consciousness is like, right?
Awake, asleep, and dead.
So we'll end this with one thing. So Naren, since you failed in your human ability to come up with a Wodehouse, a Yes Minister thing on consciousness, I went to ChatGPT Pro, which I have the subscription for, and I asked you to write a 2-minute script for me between Bernard and Humphrey from Yes Minister on consciousness. I'll skip to the good parts of it, where Humphrey says, "Oh, Bernard, you look occupied," etc., etc. Humphrey says that's quite a leap from your typical service work. Bernard, I suppose it is, but isn't it a fascinating concept, consciousness? I mean, what truly defines our awareness and comprehension of reality? The eternal question. Well, Bernard, in my opinion, consciousness is rather like government, an organized chaos shaped by perceptions, experiences, and a sprinkling of serendipity. Organized chaos, but aren't those contradictory? Not at all. Consider it this way. Our government is essentially an intricate web of bureaucracy, conflicts, and diplomacy. Yes, out of this chaos emerges order and stability. It goes on to a whole bunch of other things, which is shockingly like a script. It doesn't become funny at any point, but it's just like how Humphrey and Bernard would talk. So Naren, you still get points.
That's
but,
one thing I found. I don't know your experience with it. It's almost impossible to get ChatGPT to be funny. So is that the last? Yeah.
I think this is another episode. Episode for another day. But let's be conscious humans. I think
conscious of time.
We'll win out over there. Conscious of time also. So Naren, because one of us has a meeting. Okay. So Naren, you know what to do.
Yeah.
Easy one. These are really
stay
easy
safe.
One. Come on.
Stay conscious and stay simplified.
Yeah. Bye.